Hi, everybody. Welcome to Horrifically Horrifying, presented by Hollywood Critics Association, the HCA. I'm here with my cohort and co-host in crime, Heather Wixson.
Hello, Kevin.
Hello. And we have a special guest today, Staci Layne Wilson from womeninhorror.com. Staci,
Hey,
tell us a little bit
everybody.
about yourself. Sorry.
About myself. Wow. Well, where do I begin? I was born.
Do it.
Yeah, no, I'm a charter member of the Hollywood Critics Association, one of the very first to step into this wonderful role, which I love this group. And I've been in the horror genre as a journalist for a very long time, longer than I really care to admit, the early 2000s, actually. And I just started this website, womeninhorror.com, about 2 years ago. And it's going strong. And I'm really excited to be here to talk about some of my favorite romantic horror films.
Can I share a quick story? Because Staci's actually one of the first journalists I kind of got friendly with when I first moved here. And we were on, do you remember the Nightmare on Elm Street set visit?
Oh, yeah, I do.
It was because this is one of my favorite things to say when I realized how much in trouble the movie was going to be in, is because we were walking with, oh my gosh, what is the director's name now? And I'm totally blanking.
Oh, right.
Me too.
Oh my gosh. Geez. I'm so blanking right now. Kevin's going to come in and be our savior.
I am going to, but it's going to take, so tell your story.
So we're walking with the director, who is, a famous, music video guy. I cannot believe I'm blanking on his name right now.
It is Samuel Bayer.
Yes, Sam Bayer. And so we're walking, and he's gave us the whole group of us maybe 3 minutes total of his time, which is always a good sign. And I think it was you, Staci, who asked him about why he wanted to take on a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. I still have the audio file somewhere. And he literally said to us, well, there's never been a scary Nightmare on Elm Street movie, so this is going to be the first, or something to that effect. And I was like, oh my God. So, so that's actually how I got to know Staci. And that was so many years ago now.
Well, yeah, that was the day that Michael Jackson and Farrah Fawcett passed away.
It was.
Yeah. That was all the talk on set, more so than the film.
Yes.
But it was really great to talk to Jackie Earle Haley, who's a fantastic actor, and he certainly gave his all for a role that turned out to be kind of thankless. But I certainly have to say that I really appreciate my career in journalism and entertainment, because we have been sent, all over the world to get to interview interesting people. And, it doesn't always turn out the way you might hope when after you arrive. I know one time I was sent to Tokyo to see the filming of one of the Grudge movies at Toho Studios. It was really exciting.
Wow.
But, it was like a 17-hour flight, and we were there only overnight, and we only got to see one of the actors pouring tea over and over again. We didn't really get to see any further things going on. So how schedules can change when they're filming, and the journalists were all there. But it's it's quite an experience, and I really hope to get back to traveling soon. Let's hope that this pandemic is over sooner than later.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think that was one of my favorite things about coming into this circle, back in 2009 is when I moved out here and sort of really got into it. There was barely any women. And I think, Staci, you probably can attest to that, because I'm sure most of the stuff that you always did, there's always men. And so when I came into it, I think sort of my two personal heroes, one was Staci and one was Ivanka. Because there was no other kick-ass women doing this stuff. So it was a really fun time to sort of get in there and kind of, watch you women get in there and do the work and stuff. And Ivanka and you both have become amazing filmmakers in that, short span of time too.
Thanks. Yeah. And we're happy to have you in our ranks. Another kick-ass woman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying, I'm hustling, I'm doing what I can. So
You are. Staci, speaking of that, what is your, well, I don't know if that's speaking of that, but it was a good transition in my head. What is your handshake horror film? What's the horror film when you tell somebody this is a movie you love and they love it too, that you're going to connect with them?
Well, it's a movie that, maybe not a lot of people have heard of that aren't really into quirky genre films, but it's called Repo the Genetic Opera. and it's a rock and roll sci-fi comedy slasher grand guignol horror flick, and it stars Alexa Vega and Anthony Head and Bill Moseley, who's also a horror icon. And it's got just a huge cast of really great people singing and dancing their way through this slashing. And it's kind of an interesting story about actually a pandemic or an epidemic that kind of takes place in the future, where human beings or organs are starting to shut down and they have to get organ transplants. But the government is very strict on making sure that they keep up with their payments. So if you don't pay, then you might have to get your liver repossessed or your heart repossessed or your eyes repossessed. So it's really quite an interesting story, and I love it. But actually, that's where I met my current film partner, Darren Gordon Smith. He wrote the songs for Repo, the Genetic Opera, and he and I just completed a feature film that we co-wrote and I directed, and it's a rock and roll sci-fi comedy, no horror.
Really?
Nice.
That's awesome, though.
It is awesome.
That'll
It's totally up my alley too.
Second Age of Aquarius, and it's about a 1960s rock star who is brought back from the great beyond as an avatar by a computer programmer. So we kind of call it a cross between Weird Science meets Get Him to the Greek.
I love it, and sign me up, please.
I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So it's really great that, like Heather was saying, that we get to meet a lot of really interesting people on these set visits. And that's where I met Darren, was on the set of Repo, the Genetic Opera, when they were filming it. And it's directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, who directed the Saw films, and he's got Spiral coming out this year. So yeah, it's really been a great education to watch other directors work. And then after, becoming a director myself, I feel like I organically, kind of picked up tips through osmosis from being on so many horror sets.
Very nice. Very nice.
Also, one of my favorite things about Repo too, that I think sometimes gets overlooked, and not by you, but I just mean in general, but is how good Paris Hilton is in it.
Yeah,
she's freaking awesome. And when everybody, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, like, she was cast perfectly. She just it's so her. It's perfect.
Yeah, and it's like when everybody got like really pissy about like her having a music career like a few years later, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, she's awesome and she knows music. And now she's actually one of the most successful like electronic music DJs like out there in terms of like the money she brings in and stuff, which is pretty cool.
Songs in Promising Young Woman, right?
It is, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Did we ever think that was going to happen?
No, but I sang along to every single line of it, though. That's for sure.
I didn't. I mean, I know the song, but I never listened to it. But I did start liking it after that movie. I was like, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
So, since we are here and it's Valentine, it's going to be past Valentine's Day, or it's past Valentine's Day at this point. But we want to talk about romantic horror movies today. There's plenty out there. It's hard to discern which really romantic about blood and guts or serial killers, but there is. There's a lot. So let's talk about that. Let's start with you, Heather.
Okay.
What is your favorite romantic horror film?
Well, I feel bad because like mine's sort of the downer of our group. Although I think Staci's is pretty tragic too. But my pick is probably, I would say, one of my top 5 favorite movies of all time, which is David Cronenberg's The Fly. It's a movie that I've watched, and I don't even mean this like hyperbolically, like I've watched probably hundreds of times now. And it breaks my heart every single time. And it's so beautiful and it's brilliant. And it's such a tragic story of like 2 people who are so perfectly compatible for each other. They're almost imperfect. And the way that they meet is just the fact that like they both are they're so brilliant at what they do. It's when they come together, it's like when everything falls apart. And I think there's some really interesting touches in it that I just absolutely love, because it's a story of like Seth Brundle, played by Jeff Goldblum, and you have Gina Davis playing Veronica Quaife. And she's like a cool, kind of a cool no nonsense reporter, which immediately always made it one of my favorites because I wanted to be a cool no nonsense reporter. So I got part of that down, not the cool and not the no nonsense, but I got the reporter part down. And it's just one of these things where like I watch it and it's for me, it is Cronenberg's probably most emotional movie, because his projects are pretty much sort of devoid of that a lot of the times. You know, there's almost sort of like a coldness to a lot of his work, but that's okay. That's what I love about the way he looks and examines like the human condition. It's just very different than a lot of other people do it, and that's why we love him. But for me, the Fly just really is so tragic in a lot of ways, because it really is just this really fantastic story of two people who clearly love each other, but something has just broken them down inside, and then suddenly, you know, it culminates in like this really horrible sort of finale where basically Gina Davis has to shoot Brundlepod, which is the amalgamation of Seth Brundle and a fly and the telepods, in the face in very horrifically horrifying fashion, if you will.
Oh,
there you go.
I'm gonna tie that right in there. And one of my favorite things is whenever I talk about this movie, because there's the character that John Getz plays in the movie, who is Stathis Borns, who is he's a total prick. But here's the thing, he is the hero of The Fly, and he's bad and he's terrible and he's a total dick. But he's really, if you go back and you watch that movie, he is the one guy who, when Ronnie's going through all this stuff, he's there for her. Like when she finds out she's pregnant, like he doesn't judge her. He doesn't say anything. He's like, what do you want to do? And to me, especially for a movie from 1986, like it feels really kind of progressive in a way where rather than like holding sort of judgment over her, he's like, okay, well, this is the situation. What do you want to do about it? And when she wants to go and tell Seth what's going on, he's there for her. Like he gives up his arm and his foot and his like hand basically for this woman, and saves her in the end. So it's like one of those things where I'm like, yeah, Stathis is a dick, but you know, ultimately he steps up when it's, you know, when he needs to. And I think that's what is really interesting to me, is because, you know, Seth isn't the hero here. He's just sort of he's kind of part of the tragic outcome of the movie. So yeah, I could probably yammer on for like another 45 minutes, so we won't do that. But yeah, I love The Fly a lot.
I did it last night too, when you said you were going to discuss it, because I've seen it many times too, but not so many times that I have it memorized. But yeah, it really does have a great emotional core to it, which, as you say, chilly Cronenberg doesn't usually have in his films. But one of the things that I thought really sold it was the fact that Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis were a couple at the time. And sometimes that chemistry does not come across on screen for actors, but this time it really did. And, you know, it's kind of a testament to how much they bonded on such a harrowing film, because they got married shortly after that. And I think it's kind of interesting to watch it too, with that knowledge behind it. Yeah, it is a really phenomenal film, and the practical effects still hold up to this day.
Yep, I actually watched it last night too, because you had said that. And it's funny, I don't think I've seen it in probably 20 years, but I saw it so many times at the theater. I remember being in the second row, like opening night, and when she gives birth, for some reason, like it really freaked me out. I was like, whoa, hitting the side of my chair and like screaming. I don't usually do that, but something about it just disturbed me. It was just disturbing. But it's funny that, I mean, this is not like you've kind of covered the emotional and all that stuff aspect of it. But what's funny is how much I remember the way Gina Davis talks in it. She has a very specific way of talking. She's very, very understated when she talks. And I always liked her she's kind of like checking him out, and she's very side-eye about it, and she'll make little comments, but she's very strong. She doesn't kind of give a shit to anybody. Even Stathis, it's not the typical like, oh, he said something, I'm gonna back down. She just gives it back to him, and I loved that. Like, what the hell fuck are you doing in my apartment? Like, why are you here? Like, I just loved her. But even him, like his little quirky, what makes me laugh is the way he stands. He's always like posing, always posing. I love it. I love it. But I forgot so much of it. And I remember I just loved that movie at the time. And the practical effects, you're right. They like pleased. I kept on thinking, God, because I had heard they were remaking it with the guy who did Slight like 3 years ago.
Dillard, yeah.
I don't know if it's still happening, but I remember thinking like, don't screw it up with CGI and stuff. You can do a little bit of it. I could see them making him fly at some point, but I just liked him jumping around.
I hadn't even thought of that, where like you get like fly vision, and like now we're gonna have him like going around or something.
You know, he's gonna pick her up like Superman. He's gonna carry her.
Yeah, no, I love the effects in that. That was actually Chris Walas who did Gremlins as well, and I think he, if I'm not mistaken, he did win the Oscar for The Fly, which makes me realize, like, you know what? I think the Oscars sometimes they actually do pay attention to horror movies.
Yeah.
Not often, and not very recently, but as it turns out, every once in a while they do. So I'm still miffed about the short list for hair and makeup, but that's a whole nother topic.
That's a whole nother episode.
Yes.
So Staci, what is your pick?
My favorite romantic horror film is Bram Stoker's Dracula from Francis Ford Coppola, which came out in '92. It's another one that I feel still holds up. I can watch that one over and over again. I mean, of course, the legend of Count Dracula was always a favorite of mine ever since I was a kid. You know, I love the Bela Lugosi movie, of course, but I'm more into like the romantic Dracula, like the Frank Langella one. I remember seeing that one as a kid. Yeah, I love those. And I thought Gary Oldman, you know, because back then he was known for his kind of tough guy roles. He had played Sid Vicious. And, you know, I thought, well, how's he going to play Dracula? But he comes off as a very beautiful romantic lead. And Winona Ryder was also excellent in it. And even Keanu Reeves. I know he got a lot of flack for his performance, but I like him in that. He's kind of, you know, shell-shocked, which he would be. He has the character. One of the things that I really loved about it most of all was the cinematography. You know, Michael Ballhaus DP'd it, and he did a lot of films for Scorsese. He did Goodfellas and Age of Innocence, The Departed. I think he won like 3 Oscars, or he was at least nominated for Oscars. So it's a lush, beautiful, romantic kind of getaway, I think, and it's really a wonderful film that still holds up for me.
I actually just rewatched that this year too. So weird. For Christmas, I think Halloween, I was like, I'm going to try to watch. We had nothing else to do. It's like I'm going to watch a horror movie every day, so I revisited that as well. It is really a beautiful movie.
Yeah, I just finally, I just caught up with it last night. It's been years since I watched it. And I remember sneaking into theaters to see it because I was only 11. But it was cool because like at that age, or no, I'm sorry, it was 14. That's right. Because that was the same year. Oh gosh, there was something else I snuck into, but I got caught during that. But I remember what on earth did I go to and try to buy tickets for? But we got into Dracula. Oh, I was thinking the year before we also snuck into Silence of the Lambs, but we got thrown out 3 times. So, and then finally in the 3rd
that
time,
one is a little more intense.
Yeah, they made us leave the theater.
Anthony Hopkins movies, though.
Yeah, he was having quite a run.
You will break the law to see Anthony Hopkins.
I will not be stopped.
Sneak into The Father. Sneak into it.
Yes, but I had to see it because I was super obsessed with Keanu. Thankfully, I've grown out of that.
Oh, what do you mean, thankfully?
Yeah, no. Everybody knows that's
hotter now.
So of course I was like sneaking into that. And I just remember being really blown away by the feel of it because it didn't feel like anything else that was happening in movies in '92. Like it almost felt like this like lost, like sort of Hammer movie because it was very opulent, very ornate. The costuming, and I'm totally blanking on her last name, but I know it's Eco. And I'm
right. Yeah, I have a whole book on the costuming, and it's just splendid.
It's amazing.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And one of the people that I've gotten to interview over the years for the book stuff that I do is Michelle Burke, who won I believe she won the Oscar with Greg Canham on Dracula, if I'm not mistaken, because I got to hold it. And it's funny because she always tells the story the first time that they brought out Gary Oldman with his big like hair and stuff. And she did exactly what Francis wanted. Like he wanted him to look like that. And then all of a sudden she started hearing people whispering on the set, oh my God, he looks like Mickey Mouse. And because they had the shadows and stuff. And she was like, oh my God, they're going to crucify me. I'm so like, I'm going to get kicked off this movie. But Francis loved it. And he wanted it to be sort of this over the top presentation of Dracula because you'd sort of had the very sort of stripped down bare, you know, Bela Lugosi original, like, so no, like he was supposed to be this reinvention. And I know it's something that like a lot of fans have sort of criticized the movie for that for that sort of weird hairdo and how, you know, it feels kind of over the top and unnecessary. To me, that's what I love about it. Like, if you're going to do it, go over the top.
Right.
Well, that Victorian era, you know, it's very opulent. So yeah, I think it's perfect. And yeah, I still love that movie, and that would be my #1 most favorite romantic horror film. How about you,
Nice.
Kevin?
Mine is a movie called Spring by Benson and Moorhead, who just recently came out with Synchronic, I think is currently on VOD, which is a little bit higher budget. But Spring, I did, you know, I caught it one day. I think I reviewed it for something, but I had no idea what it was. But I just fell in love with it. It's about this guy. I'm going to blank on everybody's name because this is
Lou Taylor. He's Evan
Lou Taylor
Pucci.
Pucci. Yes, who P.S. super hot in this movie. Like I was like,
It was an Evil Dead.
I was gonna say, do you prefer Lou Taylor Pucci Evil Dead or Lou Taylor Pucci Clean Cut in Spring?
Kind of clean cut, because I actually went to Instagram to be like, what does he look like now? And he was like long hair, he's kind of shaggy, but he's just so cute in this movie. I don't know. Anyway, just side note. But what I like, so it's about this guy whose father has already died. His mother immediately gets cancer, so he's at the end stages of her cancer. She dies, and he's just kind of lost. He's like, my whole family's dead. And he gets in a fight at a bar, and the police want to come after him. So he just decides to go somewhere. So he gets in a cab. He's like, where should I go? And goes to Italy. So then it becomes kind of this before series, the Before Sunset, Before Sunrise, all that. It becomes one of those movies. It's very talky. He meets this Italian girl, and they strike up this. They have a lot of chemistry. They spend their days talking and whatever, and they start kind of dating in the first 5 days. But there's something not quite right about this girl, and you find out that she has some monstrous tendencies. But they focus on it more than I remember because I rewatched it last night. But what I like about this movie is it's very, you know, emotionally truthful. Like they really do. I mean, it's been 5 days, but they really do bond together. They have great chemistry. But what I thought was interesting was there was a study of, you know, what will you accept in another person? Like we want to accept each other's flaws. She clearly has a huge flaw, but it's also something that's not her fault. So the fact that he still wants to be with her, still wants to kind of like, let's go, we're going to do this anyway because I love you, I thought was super sweet. And even though there's some horrific things that happen throughout it and some shocking things, when it ends, you just kind of go, oh, and then it ends and you're so good. And the music is great. It's beautifully shot and it's beautifully acted. I don't know who the girl is because I don't know if I've ever seen her again, but she's excellent.
Oh, she's on The Walking Dead, which I don't watch. But I did look her up. Yeah, it's like, oh, she's on The Walking Dead.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, Nadia Hilker is the actress.
Is that her name? Okay.
Yeah. Staci, this was your first time watching Spring, wasn't it?
It was.
What did you think?
Oh
no.
I'm in the minority here. I didn't love it, but I see your points, Kevin, about why you liked it. It definitely does have that kind of supernatural Before Sunrise vibe. To me, it didn't need to be that long. It was 2 hours long. I feel like it could have been maybe an hour and a half, but it would have been maybe had more impact for me. But you're right, it does have beautiful locations. The actors are terrific. Yeah, I was surprised where they could film there. It looks like they filmed right there in Italy at the catacombs. And
right.
They did. They got pretty much carte blanche.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, so it's definitely a great travelogue, if nothing else.
For sure. I thought the same thing when forgive me for not knowing any of these, you know, these historic places, but when he steps in to where the volcano people.
Oh yeah, where the bodies are.
Yeah, where the bodies are, and he steps into it, and she's like, "Oh my God, don't do that!" But I'm like, "But he really did just do that."
Yeah.
So like, how did they get permission to do that?
They're like, "We won't step in there. Quick, jump in and jump out." Yeah.
That's what my thought was. Like, they're doing this real quick.
Yeah, guerrilla filmmaking for sure.
Yeah, I've been a huge fan of Benson and Moorhead for pretty much since Resolution, as they're affectionately known, the Gas Money Kids. Because I think that's what they said they used to work for, was gas money, basically. And just to see their evolution as filmmakers, like I like Synchronic, but it's not my favorite, but I appreciate the ambition behind it because it is probably their most ambitious. and their sort of most budgety movie, I guess is the best way to put it. That's official film critic talk there. It's very budgety in its nature. But just seeing them go from like, you know, Resolution and to going to Spring and then The Endless, and just this like sort of really natural progression with them. It's really fun. And the fact that like they're going to be doing Marvel stuff now, like part of me wants to keep them here.
Yeah.
I want them as part of our camp, but like ultimately, like go get your money, like go get some Marvel money, and then come back to us, you know.
Alternate, yeah. Do the big one and then do the nice small one.
Yeah. So I'm so happy for them because years and years and years ago, I did like a little like 2-year run of like a film festival, and I was really excited because the first year I got to show Resolution. And to me, being able to put that movie on a big screen, and then there wasn't a ton of people there because it was like in a weird location, and it was what it was. But there was probably about like 30 people there. And I actually had a couple people who came up to me afterwards and they're like, wow, they're like, thank you for showing that because I probably would have never watched it otherwise. And I loved it. And like, to me, that's like sort of like their sort of brand where like these stories that maybe necessarily you wouldn't normally seek out, but then you kind of like go into them and you're like, oh wow, like I like movies that can surprise me and that can kind of, you know, make me feel something. And I always get that, you know, that reaction whenever I'm watching stuff from them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm disappointed, Stacy, but it's okay.
Somehow I'll try to find my way back into your.
Don't cry, Kevin. It's going to be okay.
Well, speaking of crying, we could talk about a couple of the headlines. And if you look in the back, you can see my Buffy poster.
I see.
Buffy the musical episode.
It's been a rough week, huh?
It's been a rough week. So we have poor Charisma Carpenter revealing her history with Mr. Joss Whedon, and then Sarah Michelle Gellar showing her support, which I was a little not surprised to see, but I was like, oh. But what do we think about? Well, I mean, have
you not seen the more stuff?
The who?
There's more.
Oh.
Oh yeah. So apparently, Michelle Trachtenberg, who was 15 when she did Buffy, came out and said, you know, basically assumed everybody's worst fears that Joss isn't a very great guy. And then basically pointed out the fact that there was a rule on sets that at no time was Joss supposed to be alone in a room with Michelle ever.
Huh.
So that's weird and disconcerting. And I know Amber Benson also came out and said that, you know, she was very stressed out during her times on Buffy.
I heard that, yeah.
And, you know, and she kind of stood with everybody else. It's really tough because like, and then we were joking about this, like, well, why aren't more of the men talking about this? And Stacy, you mentioned Anthony Stewart Head, who was in Repo, also Buffy. And he actually did a talk show today, and he was genuinely upset about this. And I feel really bad because he's Giles. But he was saying how like he always saw himself as like a father figure on sets. And he had hoped that people trusted him enough to come to him for these kind of things. And he was really sad that they didn't, because you know, as the seasons wore on, like Giles was used less and less, which meant he was around less. So he really had no idea that this stuff was going on. And then everybody's like, well, how come nobody else is saying anything? And then I saw a thread on Twitter where they're kind of like going through all the gentlemen's bad behavior from the Buffy Whedonverse group. And I was like, oh, okay, never mind. And it's tough because I'm going through this with a friend who very much has been like obsessed with Marilyn Manson, like since I met her 25 years ago. Like we actually went to a show together at our college. And they like, it was during the whole heyday when like the church people would show up and try to throw pamphlets at you and stuff like that. And like, you know, so she's been a huge fan of his for a really long time. And I've liked his music, but I wouldn't call myself like a diehard. But you know, it's still there. And she's like in total, like, no, this can't be a thing. And I was like, no, it's definitely a thing. And she's like, well, I don't really care. Like anybody can make an accusation, you know, and then somebody's life is ruined. And I was like, well, hon, if you have
25 people do it.
Yeah. Like
you have to start thinking.
Yeah. So it's tough because, you know, I'm somebody who grew up, Buffy meant a whole lot to me. I still remember after my freshman year of college, I wasn't able to go back traditionally for my sophomore year So I had to like do community college for a while because my mom just kind of ran out of money to send me to school. So we had a really big blowout like the end of that year, which would have been like my sophomore year of school. And she kind of threw me out. So I had to kind of like find my own place. And so age 19, like I'm sitting in my apartment by myself, and it's like the season 2 finale of Buffy where like she has to leave Sunnydale and like her life is ending. And I just remember sobbing like that. And that to me was like this thing, like I really latched on to Buffy because she was this girl who was just trying to do the right thing, and like everything was just going wrong. And I was like, oh my God, I get you, Buffy. So it's tough when like these things that you love and these people that you admire turn out to be like total shitbags. Like it just sucks. Like I remember when I used to work at a special effects shop when I first moved out here. And one day they asked me to go to Fox to drop off appliances for Fringe. And so that was like my first like studio errand, and I'm feeling so cool and excited. And I get into an elevator, and lo and behold, I'm in an elevator by myself with Joss Whedon. And I'm freaking out inside. Like, I'm like, oh my God, but I'm not saying anything because I'm keeping it cool. And I'm like, to me, that was like, oh, this is how like living in LA is. Cause I'd only lived here like 6 months. And I was like, oh, this is what it's like. And now it's like, oh, I was Joss Whedon in the elevator. Okay. So it sucks, but I think I think we have to tear it down to rebuild it. I think this is only sort of the beginning. I think that just historically, there's a lot of bad behavior that's just been kind of accepted and sort of swept under the rug. And I just don't think people are willing to tolerate it anymore. I think we're all tired after the last 4 years where our bullshit levels are just low and we just don't want to deal with it anymore, I think.
True.
So
I feel like, like you said, tear it down to rebuild it. But I'm, getting back just to that specific anecdote that you brought up, I feel like once an artist creates something and puts it out in the world, it's really not theirs anymore, it's ours.
Yeah.
So I don't think we should feel bad about loving Buffy.
No.
I don't, or whatever music got us through life in our teens, that's really, it's ours at that point because we're taking what we need from it, and it's not, I don't feel like it's really tied to the creator anymore at that point.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that because I struggle with Michael Jackson because I hear him come on the radio and it's almost like, oh my God, turn it off real quick. I don't want to hear him. But then I do remember, like, I grew up in the 80s. I was a teen in the 80s. I went to college and high school in the 80s. Like, that was my time of kind of discovering myself. And we used to listen to him all the time. And it brings back fond memories of it. But at the same time, now I'm just like, I get an icky feeling. So I get torn.
Well,
I don't want to give up on, the Billie Jeans and the
if you went through the museum and looked at all the paintings by the great masters, and you had to have all this baggage about all the things that they've done, really, I feel like we should love the art for what it is. It is the art, and it's once it's in the public, it belongs to all of us.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you Heather, you said, and I know this is not horror related, but we talk about needing a change and things have to change. And I think that's what everybody who watched the Britney documentary kind of realized was like, we all watched these things happening when it was happening. We watched those interviews, and I used to, like, I can't stand Diane Sawyer, so whenever she interviewed anybody, it freaked me out. I'm like, why are you asking these questions? And the way she was asking them also bothered me. But when you string them all together, I was like, this is disturbing. And it would never happen today. Thank God it would never happen today. And if it would, people would call them out. But I'm kind of glad that came up. And I'm kind of glad that she gets a little bit of a clean slate, because even my niece is 21, 22. And I remember growing up, like, I don't think her mother really liked Britney Spears. They all knew I did. I was a huge fan. And they used to make fun of me. But she, she liked Miley, but now she's a Taylor Swift person. Never would listen to Britney, was kind of against her. And I texted her the other day. We were texting about some other documentary, and I said, did you watch it? And she said, yeah. And she said, it's weird because we grew up, and all of, like, the people that I watched, Miley and Demi, they would always tell them, don't be like Britney. Don't be like Britney. And she's like, and then you see this, and you're like, Britney didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
She was just being herself.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see her shift, her whatever when I'm thinking of her
her public image persona
shift on her, which made me happy. And I was like, so can I get you to like her now? And she's like, haha. Not gonna happen, but I tried.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, if you look at the way media has done it to a lot of us, I mean, I think for me, like the first case that I really remember of people like that sort of being a thing was Princess Diana. Like the hell that woman went through, and it basically ended up costing her life.
Right.
Like, you know, there was all the jokes about Britney, but like, what if her life had culminated in the very same fashion? Like, you know, paparazzi were awful. I mean, they're still awful to a degree, but at least there's some laws in place now that sort of protects people to a degree. But like, you know, it makes you think of like the things that like you did back then. Cause like, I do remember being really sad about Britney's breakdown because I liked her. I was like in my 20s, like, you know, when she was kind of becoming a thing. And I had like cousins who liked her. But it's funny because like all the outrage around her, which I thought was really her comparatively like to somebody like Madonna, who was very much the figure of outrage. Madonna was not allowed in my house. Like I could watch horror movies all day. I could not listen to Madonna. It did not matter. I was not supposed to see Desperately Seeking Susan, like nothing Madonna. Like she was the devil in my house, which is so funny. So for me, like I always thought the outrage around Britney was really stupid because I was like, Madonna, I got it, because there was sort of, she had like sort of that, she played around with religious iconography, and she made, you know, a lot of white people really uncomfortable with her, like a prayer video. And she was always challenging people with her sexuality, where Britney was just a kid coming into her sexuality. She couldn't help it. Right. You know, what is she supposed to do? Like, and it seemed really, really unfair. I do remember making fun of the kid who was the Leave Britney Alone kid, the Chris Coker kid. Oh,
yeah. But now we're like, he had it.
He was so right. He was so ahead of all of us jerks. So he was one where I was like, oh, honey, just calm down. It's okay. Like, you know, I mean, I'm passionate about a lot of things, but I'm not this passionate. But like, he was right. Like, and the way that we just sort of destroyed that girl's life and the things that she's had to deal with, it's pretty sad. And it's interesting that it just seems to be like, I think there's this sort of the second snowball effect that's coming. And I think it's making a lot of people uncomfortable, because I'm wondering, you know, I noticed this when Me Too came out, and I don't remember, somebody had tweeted this about like, you notice a lot of guys being a little more quiet these days, because you have to wonder how many of them are reconciling their past behaviors and wondering, well, what did I do? Did I do anything? And if you have to wonder, then chances are you probably did something not great.
Yep.
And, you know, and I think that brings up an interesting point of like, what cancel culture is, because we saw the whole situation with Gina Carano this week, and everyone's like, oh, cancel culture. And it's like, well, no. It's not cancel culture.
Taking responsibility for your actions.
Exactly. Because like, if I go on Twitter and I start spouting off a bunch of anti-Semitic stuff that's, you know, harmful to certain, you know, communities, and talking down to trans people and things like that, like my boss is going to fire me because I'm acting like an idiot and like a horrible person. I would be the only
host of this show.
You would. You're gonna leak some false audio now, aren't you?
I'm gonna manipulate.
You want it all for yourself, Kevin. I know. So it's consequences reaction. Like, you have freedom of speech, but you also have the freedom to have to answer for what you've said. And
you're working for a company, and the company can say, I don't like what you're doing, and I don't want you representing our company.
And all she had to do was shut up. That's all she had to do. She just stop. Just stop. Like, you can think whatever you want and be a terrible person here. Just stop. Because I'm not naive enough to believe that everybody in Hollywood thinks the way that I think. Like, but most of people, like, they shut their mouths. She didn't. She doubled down and she paid the price. And now everyone's like, cancel Disney Plus. And I'm like, yeah, right.
If like that's ever gonna happen.
So
please.
But yeah, well. It's crazy out there. So
well, let's move on to something happier, I suppose.
Yes.
And that would be like, what do we want to recommend? What's out right now?
I know Staci had a few good picks too.
Did she? Okay, yeah. Let's start with Staci. Tell us what you're watching.
Well, February 12th, which this podcast may be out after that, but in time for Valentine's Day weekend, is Tentacles, which is the new Into the Dark Hulu entry, the first one in quite a while. They've been taken on a hiatus. It's a very female-friendly film. Jason Blum has definitely turned himself around and been hiring women, writers and directors for these things. This one is written by Alexander Petchman and directed by Klara Maranovich. And it stars Dana Drory as a sort of human cephalopod. So she's got tentacles, but it's not really Lovecraftian. It's more of a romantic body horror film. So that one's kind of fun to tune into if you're looking for something new. And then I don't know if it's out yet. It's a kind of a folk horror film along the lines of Wicker Man, but it is Lovecraftian, and it's called Sacrifice. And it's features our beautiful horror icon, Barbara Crampton, who is wonderful in it. So that one really, I thought that was excellent. I enjoyed that quite a bit. And then also there's one more called A Nightmare Wakes, which is a Mary Shelley biopic, which is also directed and written by a woman, which is a nice, to see women taking over the reins on these stories and taking over the narrative. And I think that one is coming out soon too. I'm not quite Shudder. It's coming on Shudder.
I think that one's actually already on Shudder.
It is.
Is
Okay.
it?
Yeah, that one came last week, I believe.
And you liked it.
It's got a lot of nightmare sequences, so it's very dreamy visuals, and it's an interesting story too. And Mary Shelley was such a tragic figure. It's always something interesting to learn about her. And she's the author of Frankenstein, in case somebody listening here doesn't know that.
I was wondering about that movie. I didn't know if it would. I saw the trailer and I was like, I'm not sure if it would be any good.
The guy who plays Percy Shelley, I feel, is very miscast. Nothing against the actor, but he just didn't really fulfill the role for me. But I think anytime we can watch horror stories about women, for women, by women, I think it's a good thing.
I'm glad you mentioned Sacrifice, because that one really surprised me. And that actually just on Tuesday came out on demand.
Oh, okay.
So it's like in limited theaters right now. I'm probably playing like drive-ins here and there. Mm-hmm. And then it's like Blu-ray DVD is like later this month. And the only reason I kind of went into it was like, oh, Barbara, like I will watch Barbara in everything and anything. What really surprised me is because it is this Norwegian folktale. Like I've always sort of felt like those worlds. Oh, we just lost Staci, so hopefully we'll get her back in. But I'm gonna I don't know if I should keep going.
We could just pause because he can edit it, right?
Yes. All right. So
okay.
But yeah, I'm actually really glad you mentioned Sacrifice, Staci, because one of the things that really surprised me about it is, it is a Norwegian folklore type story. And so I was expecting a very masculine type of like themes to it. And I love the fact that it's not that at all. And I won't say where it goes, but it's really surprising. And I was really, really pleasantly surprised by how that movie came together in the end. And I think Barbara does a fantastic job. And I believe if the lead actress, her name is Sophie, and I'm blanking on her last name. So if she's somehow watching, I apologize. But she is a trooper in this movie.
Yes.
And I really loved her performance too.
So did I. Yeah, that, like you said, it's a surprising conclusion. I don't want to say, it's not really like a twist. It's not like M. Night Shyamalan or something like that. But it is sort of a subtle difference to what you might think is coming along in the end. And it surprised me. And like I've seen hundreds and hundreds of horror movies, and so to surprise me is something. So I enjoyed that quite a bit.
Oh, nice. I'm going to have to check it out.
You definitely should.
Good.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a look.
Heather, what about you?
So lately I've been rewatching some stuff for interviews. So like so that's nothing super notable. Like I just had to rewatch Monster Hunter, which I
love Monster Hunter.
I know most people like everybody kind of hates on Paul W. Sanderson. I will defend that man till I am in the grave. And I really liked it. Like, I know the beginning is a little wonky and it kind of just sort of ends without an ending. But like when you get Tony Jaa and Mila together in that movie, like that is when it hits. Yep. And I'm so in, and I'm a weirdo who loves watching people play video games. So for me, like the fact that it feels very video game-esque, just like it was perfect for me. So
it was the cat pirate. The
and
cat pirate is amazing.
Sexy Kitty Pirate, which I really want a figure of. I really want that. So I'm hoping,
I want a whole movie of him at this point.
Yeah, it's funny. I think we talked about this before, but they said when I interviewed Paul for the movie, he was saying how when they first did their test screening for it, they the Sexy Kitty Pirate, which is what he became known as, tested the best out of everybody in the movie, and he was like, "Oh my god, like what is going on?"
You know why though? Because it comes out of nowhere.
It does.
I mean, you're all of a sudden like, there's this weird CGI cat character. Like, where did he come from?
And he's flirting with Mila Jovovich. Like, of course. Like, how do you resist him? So, but I do want to point out a few movies that have just recently come out. One is A Glitch in the Matrix, which is the latest documentary from Rodney Asher. What I really appreciate about Rodney's movies is like, they're not even necessarily subjects that I'm super into. Like, I don't believe in simulation theory. I don't feel like we are in a matrix right now. But he makes me question whether or not we are, which is interesting. And there's just something about the way he's able to sort of pull back the layers, like The Nightmare. I've never really experienced that kind of stuff, but it makes for a very interesting documentary. And it's like something with like The Shining. Like, I understand that there's a lot of thematic elements there, but some of the conspiracy theories, I'm like, I don't know, but I will give him credit. At the end of that movie, I was like, oh, but you know, there was those the Indian head on the cans, and you're seeing it here. So I like the fact that he makes me think about things. Because sometimes you watch a documentary and you're like, okay, that was good, but it doesn't compel you to dig further.
Mm-hmm.
So that recently just came out. It premiered. It did a screening at Sundance a few weeks ago, and now it's been like officially released out there on VOD and digital and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting. It's not what I was expecting, but it also gave me a really new sort of appreciation for Philip K. Dick. And that sounds so dirty though. But like, I have a new appreciation for Dick. But like, but so like, it was one of those, like, it made me realize how many like really great movies rely on his material and how very ahead of his time that he really was, because the stuff that he was talking about like in the 60s and 70s is stuff that we're living through now. You know, so he really was, and that to me was very fascinating. So that's out there. And then another movie that is, as of us recording this, and by the time people will see it, it'll definitely be on there, just premiered on Shudder, speaking of the Gas Money Boys, is After Midnight, which is directed by Christian Stella and Jeremy Gardner. And it would pair very well with Spring, I think. And I totally think it would, because it's very drama driven. Like there's really the genre stuff that's probably like 20% of the movie. So that's why I always tell people going into it, like, don't expect a monster movie. But it's actually one of my very favorite performances from Brea Grant in it. I think she's exceptional. There's a monologue in there. I've seen the movie twice, and every time she delivers that monologue, is it your second cup of wine, Kevin? Do you have two?
This is actually on Diet Dr. Pepper.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I was gonna be like, wow, you came prepared.
I shifted.
I
literally can't get out of the space right now. My bed is here, my desk is here. I can't go anywhere. I had to prepare.
Gotcha. But yeah, I really love that movie a lot, because it was very much more drama driven than I was expecting. But it says a lot about like where modern relationships are, and like, what do you do when you're with somebody for so long and you're like, this just isn't it? And like, do you just go? Do you stay? Do you try to fix it? And I think it asks a lot of really interesting questions for people who are like sort of in their 30s in their relationships and just figuring out what comes next. And it also has a very adorable karaoke scene involving Jeremy Gardner singing Lisa Loeb. So that for me, I was already like, I was 2/3 of the way in the bag for it before then. And then that hit and I was like, yeah, I'm in. But if you're looking for super monster creature feature stuff, this isn't it. But it is produced by Benson and Moorhead. And I believe Justin shows up for a little bit of a role in the movie as well. But it's a movie they made for like, $1.50. But it feels like so much more. So yeah, so that just made its way onto Shudder. But unfortunately, that's like kind of like all the new stuff I've seen. So I made time to go see Suspiria at the drive-in. so that was fun.
For a waste of time.
Nice.
Huh?
That is never a waste of time.
No, it was not. It was one of those, I was like, well, we're going to get home and I'm going to have to work till 5 a.m., but it's okay because it was Suspiria. And that's always a good thing. So
Nice.
yeah. How about you, Kevin?
My two are the two that I can think of offhand that I've watched. I mean, not even watched recently. One of them has been out for a while, but it came out to theaters first and is now on VOD. But I feel like nobody's talking about it. But I loved it. In fact, I'm surprised it didn't make our nominations. I mean, I guess I'm not, but it was called Come Play.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's about this autistic kid, which we can get into a sidebar about that. Like, was he autistic or not? And why are people not up in arms about that? I don't know. But he's an autistic kid who is, finds this, I can't even remember because it's a long time ago, but he finds this kind of book on his iPad that talks about this creature. What was his name? Do you remember his name? Larry.
Okay.
So it's this creature, Larry, who just wants to be your friend. And Larry is this spindly, horrible creature that exists and he wants to be these little kids' friends. So it reminded me, like, what I thought it reminded me of Poltergeist in that it was a fun horror movie. You had the kids involved, which is always like fun to see kind of kids reacting to stuff and how they react to stuff because they're a little bit more open to things. The fact that the kid couldn't talk, so they used a lot of stuff with, or he chose not to talk. They would use the iPad a lot, and they used the facial recognition a lot. So when he would go through his room, suddenly the facial recognition would notice something behind him, and you knew like Larry was somewhere in the back. But like the sound design is really good. It was genuinely like unsettling and creepy, but in that fun, like, oh my god, where is it going? I just thought it was really, really good, and it has a kind of a sweet ending too. But I wish more people saw that. I wish it had come out at a time when everybody was going to the theater because it's a theater movie for sure.
Yeah.
I watched it on TV, on my big screen, but I kind of wish I'd seen it at the theater. So I want people to see that. And then the other one is not getting a lot of attention, but it came out a couple weeks ago called The Night. I'm not going to remember. I just said his name, the director's name. But it's an Iranian director about this couple and their kid who I think it's vaguely, I don't think they mention it's the Hotel Cecil, but I think it's supposed to be the Cecil Hotel downtown LA, that they stop in for the night because they're like arguing and they're tired and he's a little drunk and she's like, let's just stop at the hotel. And then all this crazy stuff happens at the hotel. But it's more, I thought it felt like very Kubrick in the way that it's hard to explain, but it's just the way that things happened in the hotel and the characters they met there. And there wasn't a lot of characters because it seemed like no one was at this hotel, which was also creepy. But it really has a lot to do with like guilt and this relationship between, the husband and wife that wasn't going so well and secrets that they had. And the secrets really come into play with whatever is affecting them, and the hotel has to do with them holding things in and not revealing things. So it was an interesting morality play too, but I thought it was genuinely, I mean, it wasn't super, super scary, but it was unsettling. The sound design on that one was really good too. The set design was really good. But it was kind of something different that I haven't seen in a while. So I think people should check it out. It's good. It's really good.
Yeah, I haven't seen either one of those and I feel bad. But when you were mentioning Come Play, have you seen Z?
No, but it's on my Shudder list.
It's very much in the same vein, but not fun. Like it's pretty messed up. Like there's a moment where I literally was like, holy shit, like what was that? And that one is another one that kind of surprised me. There's a few on Shudder that have kind of popped up over the last year where I'm like, I don't know, I guess I'll watch it. And then by the end, I'm like, oh, that was actually pretty good. So
did you watch The Pool?
Yeah,
it's so good.
Like, and on paper, that movie shouldn't be as good as it is, but it's great. Like, I was really impressed with it.
Did you see that, Staci? Do you know what we're talking about?
Well, I don't have Shudder.
Oh,
so,
Staci.
No, but I do get screeners. However, I have not seen that one. No, it sounds pretty interesting though.
Yeah, it's basically they're they're in Thailand. They're filming something in one of those deep pools for whatever, and then this guy falls asleep after they're draining the pool. Everybody leaves, so he's now stuck in this pool and can't get out. And an alligator falls in.
What? Okay.
But it is genuinely, I mean, the CGI was a little iffy,
Yeah.
but it genuinely suspenseful, but also slightly over the top, where you're kind of like just laughing out loud, but also like clapping,
That
and
sounds fun.
like I had a great time watching that. It was so
It's
much
sort
fun.
of like a hyper style, or not, I wouldn't say hyper stylized, but sort of like a bigger or like just a little campier version of like Crawl in a way. I don't know how to
Yeah,
explain it. Like it's one of those where it's not playing it super serious, but
right.
it is serious. So it's like, yeah, it's
Because you
kind of its own
genuinely
little
get
thing.
like afraid. You're like, what the hell would I do? You know, and then like his girlfriend falls in, like it was, oh, it's a
I'd be
nightmare.
lunch. I'd be lunch. That's all. I'd be like, all right, I guess this is how it happens.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but yeah, they're actually pretty surprising with a lot of the stuff that they've done. And the fact that like they have a movie on the short list for the Oscars is really incredible. So
Have you
shout
seen
out
that? I only
La
watched part
Llorona.
of it. I
I
fell
loved
asleep.
it. I loved it.
Okay.
I saw it at Sundance 2020.
Did you?
And it was, I got a chance to speak with the director Jairo Bustamante, and he was just like the stories he would tell, because he's from he's from I think it's Guatemala. Oh gosh, Guatemala.
I think
Oh
it's
my
Guatemala.
gosh, sorry, I sound so stupid right now.
No, I think
But it
I
was
think
just
you're right.
like the stuff that he reconciles in that movie through horror is just, it's remarkable. The cinematography is just wonderful. The story, how it all wraps up, just really moved me, and it was probably one of my favorites I saw out of Sundance that year. So it's nice, because it sucks, because like for here in the States, like it kind of came on the heels of The Curse of La Llorona.
Right.
So
Which we all
everybody's,
suffered through.
I didn't hate it, I
Oh
didn't love it, but
my
it's
God.
my love for Linda Cardellini.
But it
I
wasn't,
can't
wait,
help it.
wait, she was in that?
Yeah, she was the mom. She was the
Like,
social worker.
why am I thinking, that's hilarious. Why am I thinking it was what's her face from The Conjuring?
Oh,
The
wow, we're
Mystic
doing really.
Pizza. Lily Taylor. Why did I think it was
Oh,
Lily Taylor suddenly?
I
You're
don't
right. It was
know.
Linda and I love Linda Cardellini too. But
Yeah,
yeah, no, I couldn't with
Velma.
that movie. Nope.
So, but yeah, I think it was just one of those things where people just sort of thought it was like a
The same thing.
kind of, it was the same movie or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one I definitely highly recommend checking out.
I have
It's
to
really
rewatch
good.
it. I was tired when I was watching it, so.
I get it if you're tired. It can be a little slow, and it's a lot of sound also too,
Mm.
especially the lot of the night shots. But I think it's again, I think sort of coming on the heels of our election, I think it has a lot to say in terms of sort of public, political figures answering for their sins in a way.
Mhm.
So, but it was good stuff.
Well, I mean, I think I don't know what time it is, but I think we should probably wrap it up. But thank you, Staci, so much for being here.
Oh, thanks
Um,
for having me on.
it's I haven't actually talked to you too much since I'm kind of new to this group as well. I think I've only been with it for like a year now. I think almost exactly a year. So it was nice to get to know you a little bit better. So
Yeah.
thank you. And thanks, Heather, for
You're very welcome.
being as awesome as you are. And then I guess we'll see everybody next week.